Hey, it's Matt with Surf City TCG here with part 3 on my series where I am reviewing the cards from Magic's newest set, Bloomburrow, for the purposes of Commander. So we're going to be finishing out the rest of the cards today, which are letters P through Z. But before I get to those letters, I actually want to start on Helga Skittish Seer, which some of you noticed that accidentally skipped over in the last video, so my apologies for that, but we're going to pick it up now. So let's take a look. Helga Skittish Seer is a, what is this guild called or whatever they are? Bant. Bant, white, green, and blue for a 1/3 frog druid that says whenever you cast a creature with mana value 4 or greater, you draw a card, you gain a life, and you put a +1 counter on Helga. And he, or I guess she, can tap for X mana of any one color, where X is her power. And that can only be used to cast creatures with mana value 4 or greater, or ones with X in their costs. So this is a Bant value deck. Go figure. Feels a lot like Tulane in that, like, you're just going to be playing a lot of creatures. You're going to be getting a lot of value off those creatures. Seems very, very good. It can make a lot of mana. It's almost like Selvala and Tulane had a little frog baby. Seems very, very powerful. No protection inherent, just like Tulane. So if you're playing against Helga and you're not having a immediate plan to win the game anytime soon, you're going to want to probably remove her at least once, even though it can feel bad to remove someone's commander like the second they play it. This is the kind of commander that if you don't deal with before they start the value train rolling, then you're going to have a hard time ever catching up because how do you lose when you're just every time you cast a creature and all the creatures they play are going to meet these criteria, right? So every time they play a creature, they're going to be drawing a card, gaining a life, and then putting a counter on Helga. And they're probably going to have hardened scales types effects where they're getting additional counters. So stuff like hardened scales, stuff like just the one that doubles counters, like let's see, twice for counters. Enchantment. This one, branching evolution. So like they're going to be getting tons of counters on Helga, and then all of a sudden she's tapping for 4, 6, 8, 10 mana, and they're just playing their whole deck, right? Because every time they play a creature, they're drawing a card. It's almost like you have a great hand in the command zone. So um, definitely an excellent deck. This is going to be like no matter how you build it, it's going to be strong. If you're a new player and you don't have a like huge collection of cards, this is a great starting commander for you because you can just you don't even need good fixing. Like you're in green, you could just play like all the basic fixing stuff like Nature's Lore, Three Visits, Farseek, Kodamas Reach, Cultivate, just ramp out a bit of land and then like boom, just rely on her Helga to draw. You don't even need to play like a lot of draw spells. You just play a bunch. Like honestly, if you just built this creatures only, like you put the companion, uh, what is that companion called? I'm so bad at remembering this stuff. It's the same one I use for Henzi in my all creatures deck. Uh, like you could build this deck all creatures is my point, and Umori, the collector. So you can say like each non-land card in my deck shares a type. So all the cards that aren't lands are creatures. So it's not really that powerful because like the companion effect is totally nerfed after they nerf it. Go figure. So now it like costs 3 mana. You get to put that card into your hand, and then you can just play it like a normal card. It doesn't go back to the companion zone. But it's just kind of fun. Like if you wanted to build this commander but wanted it to be a little bit less powerful, you can do it in that way. And this deck's still going to be excellent, just like all creatures that are mana value 4 or greater, just have all the best ones. It's really fun, actually. So I don't look forward to playing against this commander. My intention is that every time I see it, I'm going to shoot it down. So if you played against me, that's what you can expect. But that being said, very, very, very good. And it's going to be popular for sure because, like, who doesn't love this just kind of like insane value? All right, let's move on to the letters we are supposed to be covering, starting with P. All right, let's start with Paw Patch Recruit. 1 mana. Hey, another 1 mana rare creature. I like it. 1 mana for a 2/1 with Offspring 2. Oh, I wanted to quick side note on Offspring because I haven't really talked about this yet, but this has a lot of potential. Like I only talked about these cards in terms of what they do by themselves, but there are so many effects that give you more than one token, be it like stuff like the originals with Anointed Procession, Parallel Lives, Doubling Season, Mondrak, Glory Dominus. I'm not going to pull these all up, but there's tons of effects like this. I think Mondrak is one of the best ones. It's on a creature, can become indestructible. It doubles any tokens you get, not just creature tokens, but they're all good. And if you have an effect like that, the offspring mechanic is that much more powerful because you're going to be getting two of those tokens or four of them. So keep that in mind. Like what I'm going to be discussing is just the base case if you don't have any effects that enhance your token making capability, but if you do, these just go even nuttier. All right, so Paw Patch Recruit is a 2/1 with Offspring 2. It's got Trample, and it says whenever a creature you control becomes the target of a spell or ability opponent controls, you get a +1 counter on a different creature. Okay, so this is just a very strong and efficient, like not exactly protection, but redundancy effect in an aggro deck. Like I think in any deck that's trying to go wide, you love to have effects like this because you've got plenty of the heroic intervention type cards that kind of protect your whole board, but what sometimes can get you is pinpoint removal on your key creatures, and then they'll just ignore the swarms. This kind of helps you in that regard, right? Because and especially if you have two of them, right? If you pay the offspring cost, you've got two of these in play. Now all of a sudden someone casts a like Hero's Downfall on your anthem creature, and yeah, that sucks, you're losing that creature, but you've got two triggers off this Paw Patch Recruit, which are going to put a +1 counter on up to two different creatures and potentially more. Like if you have a Heart and Scales out, you could get four counters. So this seems good. Um, it's not like huge standout all-star or anything, but I think it's going to be a nice little role player card in decks that often are looking for some impactful one drops because there just aren't a ton of there are a handful of excellent one drops, but like I'm always looking for more personally. So I think this guy makes the cut in a deck like Kadira or I don't really know that much about aggro decks, but like, stuff that's trying to swarm the board seems like a good fit, especially like not necessarily a completely go wide strategy, but one that's like going somewhat wide. Maybe a Kutzel deck would like this sort of card, where you're building up a medium-sized board and just trying to go wide, but still pretty big stuff. All right. Portent of Calamity. Sam Gway. Hmm. I wonder if that is Rebecca Gway's husband. Does have a similar look to the art. Interesting. Let me know in the comments if you know the answer to that question. I'm curious. Portent of Calamity. Blue and X for a sorcery. You're going to reveal the top X cards of your library. For each card type, you may exile a card of that type from among them. The rest go to your graveyard. You may cast a spell from among the exiled cards without paying its mana cost. If you exiled four or more cards this way, then put the rest into your hand. Okay, so let's say you put 4 mana into X. You're going to flip the top X of your library. If you happen to have hit four different card types, so let's say you flip a land, creature, instant, and sorcery, then you get to cast one of those for free, and then the other three go to your hand. So it's like a 4 mana, draw three, draw four, and cast one of them for free. That is Very unlikely to happen if X is only 4, though. So in the other scenario where you didn't hit 4 different types and you paid X is 4, it's just a 5 mana draw 4 at sorcery speed, which is a good rate, but I don't know if it's really good enough. But I guess what gets you there on this card is the flexibility because it really just reads blue and X, draw X cards at the worst case scenario. So I think this is the best blue sorcery speed draw spell for X. Eh, Unless I'm misunderstanding this, reveal the top. You put the rest into your hand. Wait, hold on. Maybe I'm misunderstanding this. For each card type, okay, so you only get to draw one of each card type. You don't draw all of them. Okay, I thought that seemed a little too good, so apologies for the confusion there. So you're revealing the top X. If you hit all unique types, then you get to draw all of them and cast one for free, assuming X is 4 or more. But otherwise, you only get to draw a maximum of one of each type. So it's kind of like attracts a grand unifier in that regard, like where you're going to look at the top 10, and for every type, you get to draw one of those. So this is an Atraxa. So if you paid X is 10, then it's like you got an Atraxa ETB, but it would cost you 11 mana and you wouldn't get a 7/7 flying Vigilance Death Touch lifelink. This is also similar to something like Amanatu's Augury, where you're going to exile 8, you get again a card of each type, but you get to cast all of the ones that. So this is like just obviously way worse than Amanatu's Augury, but it's more flexible. You just pay whatever you want for X. This seems like a garbage card. Like I don't see myself playing this. It's too unreliable. If you built your deck around it where you have like all unique types and like you're into it, that's cool. But this seems just like a bulk rare that no one's gonna play. All right, Ral Crackling Wit. Ral has been turned into an otter, apparently. 4 mana Planeswalker, Ral. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, put a loyalty counter on him. Okay, so any Planeswalker that has like a static effect like this tends to be pretty good. Like, first thing that makes me think of is Teferi. God, now you're gonna ask me which one. Who can even remember all the names of these things? I know what it looks like. My God, there's so many Teferi cards. Okay, hold on. Hold on. We're almost there. This one. So whenever you draw a card, he gets a loyalty counter, and then his -12 is like, boom, wreck someone's day. So, right away when you see an effect like whenever you something trigger on Planeswalker, where it's not a loyalty ability, take special note. That being said, let me actually read what the card does because that tends to help evaluations in my experience. +1, create a 1/1 blue and red otter with prowess. Okay, pretty good. -3, draw 3, then discard 2. Okay, so -3 is cast Brainstorm. So it's like a Jace the Mind Sculptor, except it's a -3 instead of a 0. Thanks. -10, draw 3, you get an emblem that says instant sorcery spells you cast have a storm. Oh my lord. Wow. Okay. Well, this is nuts. So it's obviously meant for a storm deck, like in case you didn't figure that out. Whenever you storm. It's like the exhibit meme, insert exhibit meme here if I had an editor. You know, I heard you like storm, so I stormed your storm and storm. Uh, Trying to evaluate how this might play out. So it can't be your commander. Sad. So sad face. I would make this commander deck right now if I could, but I'm not going to make a rule 0 deck. Probably. So every non-creature. So let's say you build your deck like entirely non-creatures. Maybe you put in like five, less than 10 creatures. So you've got 50 non-creature spells in your deck. So automatically, let's say you can cast like 2 to 3 a turn on average. There'll be some turns where you can cast more, and obviously, if you build your deck for Storm, you're hoping that number's higher. But let's like just evaluate this based on, hey, maybe you can play three spells a turn once you land him. Like maybe one as soon as you land him, and you plus one, so he's up to six. And then you're playing like 2 or 3 spells. Maybe you include some proliferate too, because that's what you're trying to do. I'm just trying to think like how quickly can you get him to 10? And obviously people are going to be like chomping at the bit to attack Rel because no one wants to see that minus 10 go off that isn't the person casting Rel. So I don't know. This seems tough. You're gonna be able to defend him pretty well. He makes blockers. The blockers can get decently sized. So if they send, let's say, a 3/3 and a 5/5 at Ral, okay, let's say it's a 3/3, a 4/4, and a 5/5, right? You can like lightning bolt the 3/3, pongify the 5/5, and then you've got a 3/3 blocker because it has prowess. I think this can get there. Like you throw this in any storm deck and you just have a bunch of like cheap removal, like all the cheap removal in blue and red. And then the goal is like, I guess the question is, what do you do once you get that minus 10 off? Like, what's the most broken thing you can do? And like, I'd love to hear from you in the comments about like, what's the broken thing that you think of to do with Real Crackling Wit? Because I'm not an expert on Storm, but I'm just thinking like I'll just play a bunch of cheap removal. And obviously that's not the best thing you can do, but like if you cast a lightning bolt and get 5 copies of it, that seems pretty good. I'm really fascinated by this card. I love the design and I think it's well balanced. I don't think it's too good. I could end up being wrong on that. This might end up being extremely powerful. Let's take a look at how much this is pre-ordering for, just out of to sate my own curiosity. $9. Not bad. So yeah, I like this card. I There's a lot of Storm support in the set, so Storm fans rejoice. I like Rel. All right, let's take a look at this red village. So taps for a colorless or a red if you're casting a creature, and then you can give a lizard, mouse, otter, or raccoon +1 in haste as sorcery speed only, which is pretty much all you're ever going to want to do anyway. I guess you can't use it as a combat trick when you're blocking, but that's fine. Really, you just want this for the haste. And honestly, like you're really only playing this, I think, if your commander is one of those card types, or you happen to have a ton of them in your deck, or one that you really want to give haste. So nothing super special here, but I intend to pick up a foil copy of it just to have in my back pocket for when I inevitably build a commander that is one of those types. You're going to want it in there. Rotten Mouth Viper is a 6 mana 6/6 elemental snake. As an additional cost to cast it, you may sacrifice any number of non-land permanents, and it costs 1 less to cast for each permanent you've sacked in this way. Okay, I like that so far. When it enters or attacks, put a blight counter on it. Then for each blight counter on it, each opponent loses 4 life unless they sack a non-land permanent or discard a card. Okay, so it's a built-in sack outlet, which I like, into a creature. But black has a lot of sack outlets, and I don't know if this one's particularly notable. So let's say you have 5 permanents you want to sack, and just like they're disposable, whatever. you made a bunch of blood tokens, or I guess this is going to fit best in a deck like that that's making a lot of blood tokens. You don't really want to be sacking treasures to this because like it's not really any different than just sacking them to for mana. But if you have clues or food or something that you can throw away and not that big a deal, like let's say it's a Salmon Frodo food deck and you've got five treasure or five food tokens lying around, you sack five foods to this. It's a 1 mana 6/6 vanilla, but it enters with a blight counter on it. And then as soon as it enters, each opponent loses four unless they sack a non-land permanent or discards a card, and then it does that every time it attacks. Just not seeing how this gets there. I don't like it. I will be very sad if I pull this in my mythic slot. I don't think it's good enough. If it had trample or any sort of keyword, maybe. Like, give this like death touch. Not that that helps that much on a 6/6, but like, come on, something. Trample? Yeah. Haste? Haste would have been nice. Then it could at least come in and attack and like do this thing twice. I don't know. Not definitely not feeling it. Like I if I wanted an effect that let me sack a lot of permanents, I would play that new Healess Carnage, I think it's called. It's like, yeah, this card seems better than Rotten Mouth Viper to me. Like strictly better. I mean, it's not a creature, so it's different. But yeah, I'd much rather draw four cards, draw five cards, than get a 6/6 vanilla. A 6/6 vanilla is in my mind, that is like practically worthless. I would, I'm gonna, use some hyperbole here, but like this is probably true. I would not play a 1 mana 6/6 if that's all it did. If they printed a card that was one black mana for a 6/6 snake, I would not play that card. I already don't play Sarah Ascendant. That's partially because I think it's stupid and I wish they would ban it. But I don't think a 1 mana 6/6 gets you there in Commander unless like there's an abundance of cards like that and you can really like make a huge deck out of a bunch of super efficient vanilla creatures. So yeah, I don't care for this card. This is cool looking. Salvation Swan. Cool art. 4 mana 3/3 flash. Love flash. I love me some flash. Whenever Salvation Swan or another bird enters, exile up to one creature you control without flying. It can only save ground critters. Okay. Return to the battlefield with the flying counter at the beginning of the next end step. Okay. So obviously this draws immediate comparisons to Luminous Broodmoth, which is a 4 mana also for 3/4 flying that kind of does the same thing, except it's like a static effect that like anytime a creature dies that didn't have flying comes back with flying. This Salvation Swan is definitely worse. It's not strictly worse, it's different, right? It's because it can come in, it doesn't have to just be when stuff dies, right? It can be like if it's being targeted with the Swords to Plowshares and you're like, no, I don't want my thing to get exiled. You can flash in the Salvation Swan, save the day, exile it, and then it comes back. When does it come back? Return to the battlefield at the beginning of the next end step. So whoever's turn it is, at the end of that turn is when it comes back. So you do re-trigger any enters the battlefield effects you have, which is also true with Luminous Broodmoth, but Salvation Swan can protect it from anything, including exile effects, including something like Farewell, exiling all creatures. Salvation Swan can swoop in and, you know, nobly sacrifice itself because it will get exiled with Farewell, but you get to save something under the Swan Fairies protection kind of effect. And I do tend to like that sort of thing, stuff that phases things out or exiles them until a certain time because they can save you from farewell where nothing else can. But I don't ever see myself in a million years playing this card over like the far superior options of Teferi's Protection, um, Galadriel's Dismissal is one of my favorite new cards of the last 5 years. This card is so flexible. 1 mana, you can save a single creature. You can uh, push a problemsome creature out of the game until its owner's next untap step. You can remove a blocker. You can kick it to save your whole board or to remove someone's whole board so that either you or another player can alpha strike them. Yeah, so like Galadriel's Dismissal better than Salvation Swan in every conceivable way. And then like Clever Concealment is another favorite of mine. Can be free to cast if you have 2 white and 2 other creatures, and can save any number of non-land permanents, not just creatures. So now one thing that the Swan can do, and okay, so let's talk about instead of why this card, I think this card is bad because it's not. It's a good card. It also has says that any other birds trigger this too. So in a bird tribal deck or in any deck where you're making birds for some reason, like let's say you're playing Murmuring Mystic and it's a like important part of your deck, like you plan to somehow like get it out frequently, then the Salvation Swan could be very good, right? Because then all of a sudden it's whenever you cast an instant or sorcery, you get to blink something, slow blink, which almost makes it from Salvation Swan, which is a bad card, into Displacer Kitten, which you could be playing anyway, but then you could have 2 effects like it, um, which is a good card. So, all it takes is 2 cards to turn one bad card into a good card. Anyway. I think this card's better than I'm giving it credit for. Like, it's going to be good in bird deck. If you have a bird tribal deck, if you have a Kangi Aerial Keeper commander deck, then this card's going to be good in there. If you have any other bird commander or things that making bird tokens, it's going to be good. If you have a blink deck, it's probably going to be make the cut there too, because if you blink Salvation Swan, you get to then blink something else, and that can create like sorts of chains that, start to be reminiscent of Felidar Guardian and, you know, people who have been playing Commander for some time typically have PTSD over this card because it can do some zany things. So don't sleep on this card. And if you see it, especially in a non-bird deck, if you see it in a bird deck, whatever, they're playing a bird deck, I don't think you have to worry. That's not necessarily true, but probably. If you see it in a non-bird deck and the player isn't just bad or playing random cards, then I'd be a little concerned. Definitely keep an eye out for shenanigans with this card, but in general, I'm not really blown away or anything. I keep doing that. Scavenger's Talent. All right, 1 black mana for a class. Scavenger class, apparently. Whenever one or more creatures you control die, create a food token, but only once per turn maximum. Thank goodness they put that clause on there. Otherwise, combo. Still, probably some combos with this automatically. That seems like a strong effect. It does not say non-token creatures, so yeah, looks like this goes straight in Chatterfang, like about 50 other cards in the set. All right, level 2 is 2 more mana, meaning you've paid 3 total. And it says whenever you sacrifice a permanent, target player mills 2 cards. So kind of like an Altar of Dementia Light, rather than, and also it's triggering on sacrificing any permanent, so including food, obviously, treasures. This could be a win con for a deck that just makes a lot of treasures or food if you want to try to just mill someone out. Not necessarily optimal, but like if you're playing a token deck that wants to fill its graveyard, like the new Tesa might be a good candidate for this. I forgot her name. Opulent? Yeah, this one. So like if you're playing this card where you're making a lot of clues, and you also maybe want to fill your graveyard and you're going to be sacking clues to get her spirit tokens, then you get to incidentally mill yourself so you can living death later or whatever. Black decks want lots of cards in the graveyard, so having this little incidental effect can be nice. You can also use it to get people who aren't paying attention. If they do something like cast a Vampiric Tutor and don't have a way to draw that card in response, they're like, okay, end step, they Vamp Tutor, they're tapped out. Oh, okay. I'm just gonna real quick sack of food. Is that cool? Yeah, no response. Why are you asking? Okay, well, I'll mill you too. Is that cool? Blank stare, sad face. Level 3, you've paid an additional 3 mana. You're in for 6 total now to get to Scavenger's Talent level 3. At the beginning of your end step, you may sack 3 other non-land permanents. You can't sack it, but you can sack 3 other non-lands. If you do, you get to reanimate something with a finality counter. So, good effect, good sort of inevitability in a food deck. I like this card. I think it's fine. It doesn't do anything super crazy, and the fact that it brings back creatures with finality counters prevents it from getting really nutty, pun intended. But seems like a good card. Like if you're already in a food deck, like a dedicated food deck, like Yom, Frodo Sam, um, Rocco. Oh, this doesn't go on Rocco. If only. Yeah, seems fine. Nothing amazing, but good card. Scrap Shooter. 3 mana, 4/4 Raccoon Archer. Dude, look at that thing. It's like freaking Predator Raccoon. Gift a card. You may promise an opponent a gift. Okay, so this is one where when you cast it, you can say, hey, whichever opponent you want, you get to draw a card. If you do, you get a 4/4 reach with an ETB of destroy an artifact or enchantment of opponent controls. So this is like a reclamation sage that is, well, okay, so it's only a Rec Sage if you let an opponent draw a card. So you let one opponent draw a card, you get to destroy an artifact or enchantment any opponent controls. Doesn't have to be the opponent that you let draw. And then you get an incidental 4/4 reach with it. This is a good card. Would I play it over Rec Sage? That is a really good question. Probably not, and only because I'm not playing Rec Sage anyway. Like, we're just talking about optimal decks, right? Like, if I'm playing Rec Sage, it's because I have Elf Synergy, and therefore I'm not cutting Rec Sage for Scrap Shooter. They're both 3 mana, so like if I wanted a removal spell for a toolbox deck, like for example, if I was playing a green deck that had Green Sun Zenith, aka any green deck I've ever built in history, because this is like the best card of all time. I exaggerate, sort of. But if I was playing Green Sun Zenith Toolbox deck, which I am wont to do, then I'm running Rex Sage if I have Elf Synergy, and if I don't, I'm running Masked Vandal because that card is nuts. If you don't have like 4 copies of this, maybe get them because this card is crazy. I love it. You know how many One Rings I've exiled with Masked Vandal? Feels good, man. So 2 mana, exile something. Yeah, you have to exile a creature from your graveyard, but that is pretty easy to do. So this card, so good. And More often, I'm running Druid of Purification because, like, have you seen this card? It's one more mana. It's not an elf, though. Sad. And you can't get it with Invasion of Ikoria, which has gotten me at least 3 times. But when it enters, starting with you, meaning 4 players are going to vote for an artifact or enchantment that you don't control, they can't pick any of your stuff, and all those are destroyed. So, sorry, Scrap Shooter, I don't think you make the cut. If I'm playing a deck that is so desperate for flying defense, maybe, because he's a 4/4 with reach, which is great. Hey, I find it hilarious that like things are so pushed and power creep is so real that like if you'd asked me 20 years ago, like would you play a 4/4 reach that when it enters you can destroy an artifact or enchantment for 3 mana? I'd be like, yeah, but like they would never make such a card. That's like totally broken. Now this doesn't even seem good enough to me to run in almost any deck. Again, I'm talking about in optimal builds where you're running like all the best cards. If you open one of these in a pack and you don't have a huge collection and you're just like looking for stuff to fill your deck, this is a great card. So I do want to like take a minute and say like I like to talk about the optimal card choices for every single deck, but that doesn't mean that this card is unplayable. This is a great card. It's very efficient. It does its job really well. It's just like if you have access to every card you could possibly want, which is basically what I have, if you're so lucky to be in such a situation, then like this doesn't make the cut. However, that absolutely doesn't mean you couldn't play this card. This is a good card and it's going to do well for you if you run it. Season of Gathering. Oh, okay. So this is a cycle. I heard about this on a podcast. So all of these are the same. So I'm going to talk real quick about like how these work, and then we'll talk about each one. So these are sorceries all, I think. Yes. And they all give you five, I think so. Yeah, they all give you 5 paws worth of modes. The way to understand this is the paws are like currency. So like you could, if it's easier for you and you just like need this to understand, just imagine it's like 5 coins or $5. So you get $5 to spend, right? You get 5 currencies and you can choose whatever combination of things you want that total that amount that you have to spend. So if you wanted to get all of the first effect, which costs all of them are the same. There's a one that costs one that costs two, one that costs three. So you can never get two of the one that costs three as long as you're casting only one of this spell because you only have 5 to spend. So you can't spend 3 plus 3, that's 6. Make sense? So you can get 5 of the one effect, you can get 3 of the one effect, and 1 of the two effect. I'm going to call it A, B, and C. So you can get, you know, 4 A's, but then you would have one left over. You wouldn't have anything to use it on, so you might as well get 5 A's. You could get 2 B's and 1 A. You can get 1 C and 2 A's, 1 C and 1 B. I think you get it. So that's how you evaluate this. So let's take a look at what they do. Green one is 6 mana sorcery, so you better be getting something good for that. The A effect, level 1, is put a +1 counter on a creature you control. It gains vigilance and trample until end of turn. That's very good. It keeps the counter. It doesn't keep vigilance and trample, but this is like an overrun type effect if you were to choose all of the A effect with your money. If wanted to, if you had a board with 5 creatures on it, you could put a +1 counter on each of them, and they would all get vigilance and trample. If you had hardened scales out, then they'd all get 2 +1 counters and vigilance and trample. So that's for 6 mana for a sorcery. Not really good enough if that's what all it did, but the power of these cards is in their flexibility, not in the individual effects, because presumably all of the combinations, if you evaluate them just in that format, are not going to be worth the cost. The reason you're paying a little bit of extra is for the optionality, the like flexibility to do whatever combination of things best suits that particular board state. And that kind of power and flexibility is typically very good. If you're newer to Magic and you don't have a lot of experience or like, practice with modal spells, they tend to appear to be worse than they actually are. Meaning, like, if you put them in your deck and actually play them, you'll always be, not always, but you'll often be surprised with like how powerful they end up actually playing out. So just keep that in mind when you're evaluating these. So that's sort of one way to play Season of Gathering is just 5 of level 1. Level 2 is choose artifact or enchantment, destroy all permanents of the chosen type. Wow. Okay, so that's power. Um, that's like Bane of Progress, right? So Bane of Progress also 6 mana, destroy all artifacts and enchantments. This, you could do that if you wanted. You could choose both modes. All artifacts and enchantments would be destroyed, and you get the bonus. Like you have $1 left to spend. You could spend that on putting a +1 counter on a creature you control and giving it Vigilance Trample till end of turn. So compare that to Bane of Progress. Bane of Progress is better. But again, back to my comment about flexibility and power in having the option to do what you need to do in any particular situation. So the third effect is draw cards equal to the greatest power among creatures you control. Okay, so like a Rishkar's Expertise or a um what the heck? Garrick's Return of the Wild Speaker is what it's called. So this Rishkar's Expertise obviously like the creme de la creme of effects like this. For 6 mana, you get to draw cards, same thing, equal to the greatest power among creatures you control, but you also then get to play a spell mana value 5 or less for free. So Rishkar's Expertise is again better, but this can do that plus destroying an artifact or enchantment, that plus putting the +1 counters. And these typically are going to go in the order they're listed. So if you combine the level 3 effect with 2 level 1 effects, you could put two, it would be very much putting your eggs all in one basket, so to speak, but you could put 2 +1 counters on the largest creature you control and then draw more cards if you were confident that you weren't going to get wrecked by removal, or if you were just desperate and that was the only way you might win, is if you kind of go all in on this power play. Um, what I might find myself doing frequently is hedging my bets a little. So, like, let's say I had an 8/8 and then I had a 4/4. What I might do with this, if I didn't need to destroy artifacts or enchantments, is put 2 +1 counters on my 4/4, making it a 6/6 with Vigilance Trample, and then choosing the third mode to draw cards equal to the greatest power among creatures I control. So if opponent responds with a Soul Shatter or Swords to Plowshares on your 8/8, then you still get to draw 6. So that seems like a nice option and one that you're going to be choosing. That combination is probably one you're going to choose frequently. I would guess like most of the time you cast this spell, if you put it in your deck, you're going to either be choosing level 2 twice plus level 1, or you're going to be choosing level 3 plus level 2. I'm guessing those are going to be the most two common. So level 3 plus level 2 seems really good. Like there's a couple of really pesky enchantments you need to get rid of. Someone's got a Smothering Tide, someone's got a Rhystic Study, who knows what else. So you're like, okay, destroy all enchantments and draw cards equal to greatest power among creatures I control. Let's say that's only a 4/4. Still, you destroyed all enchantments and drew 4 cards for 6 mana. That seems really good. So I like this card. I don't know if I'll play it. I might test it out. 6 mana is a lot. I really, really wish it was an instant. I hate sorceries, but um, you'll often find me jamming ways to cheat out sorceries on other people's turns in almost any deck I play, so I might play this anyway. Actually, I might end up putting this in my Glarb deck because there are going to be ways to cheat stuff out in there. So I may just test it out. Let's take a look at the next one, Season of Loss. So again, same sort of effect. This one's 5 mana. Level 1, each player sacks a creature. Level 2, draw a card for each creature you control that died this turn. Level 3, each opponent loses X, where X is the number of creatures in your graveyard. Okay, so thank goodness you can't choose number 3 twice, because otherwise, ooh, could you imagine? Like, someone's got 10, 15 creatures in their graveyard, and they're like, all right, everyone take 30 for 5 mana. But even by itself, that level 3 effect, oof, that is scary, right? there are those games where it's really late and everyone's got a full graveyard, and it's like this for 5 mana, you get to do 10 damage to everyone, maybe 15, maybe 20. Plus, you get to like pay. You could play like two of the level ones, so everyone sacks two creatures, and then everyone loses X, where X is the number of creatures in your graveyard. So there may be like two additional creatures in your graveyard after you have to sack two. So that's one way you're going to play this. It's just, okay, I win the game for 5 mana. Seems good. Another way you'll play this is, okay, I pay three of level one. Everyone's going to, so let's say you have no board, but everyone else does. Okay, now, or even if you do have a board, let's say you have a board, but you really need to board wipe. Everyone's got three. You do level one three times. So everyone sacks three creatures, and then you had three creatures that die, so you draw three. Yeah, this is a flexible board wipe asterisk. It's not always going to wipe the board, but I like it. I mean, in a very creature heavy black deck, I could see myself playing this. Season of the Bold. 5 mana as well for the red season. Level one, create a tap treasure. Why do they always have to be tapped now? I guess it's better that they're sort of putting some constraints on treasures because they were a little out of control for a while. Looking at you, Dockside. Level 2, exile the top two cards of your library. You can play them until the end of your next turn. So it's like the impulse draw, super impulse draw, meaning like not just this turn, but until the end of your next turn, which is really good. You can tap out for this and do level 2 twice, meaning like it's like a draw 4. You can play those all the way until your next turn. So these kind of cards are great if you're looking for a land drop because then like you play you flip the top four, let's say, and let's say you hit two lands. You play the land drop that you missed this turn, and then you have another land you play next turn. Yeah, so really powerful. This stuff that lets you do it till your next turn, especially something that costs five. So good thing that they made it that way. Level three, until the end of your next turn, whenever you cast a spell, this deals two damage to up to one target creature. Wow, that seems really good. So you put this in a storm deck, you set it up the turn before, it's almost like plot, and then when you're ready to go off on your storm turn, like you could even like depending on if you need mana or cards more, you set this up with either level one, two of those, so you make two tap treasures, or you do level two, which exiles you two cards that you can play next turn, and then when you get to next turn, you get to kind of machine gun everything. So this is going to have a home in certain storm decks, and it might just be good enough in other decks if it's whenever you cast a spell, it doesn't even have to be an instant or sorcery. So any spell, doesn't matter what you're playing. If you're playing a deck with a lot of cheap spells, like just a really low curve, this could be a nice top end card just to like be able to have a one-sided board wipe. That being said, am I ever playing that over Delayed Blast Fireball? I don't think so. Delayed Blast Fireball is an instant, therefore it's strictly better. And there are no other considerations to be made, so I won't even think about it. But anyway, I'm being unfair. Delayed Blast Fireball is nuts. OP. You can't compare every card to the like most nuts OP card and say like it's not as good. I mean, you can, but like that's not going to get you anywhere. You still have to run a bunch of other cards in your commander decks, not just the best ones. So I think this is a good card and I like its flexibility. I think, again, I'm going to probably be testing all of these just to see how they feel because evaluating them just by reading them, it never really works with cards like this. You really have to play it in at least a few games because sometimes like it's just a weird situation. You can't always like trust that your first impression of a card is going to be right. But, if you play it three or four times, you'll probably get a feel for how it's going to be and if it's worth it. Season of the Burrow for the white one is 5 mana. So they're all 5 mana except for the looks like blue and green ones. So this one is white sorcery, level one, create a 1/1 rabbit token. Boring. Level two, exile target non-land permanent. Its controller draws a card. Cool, I like that. So you can get two of those effects for 5 mana sorcery plus a 1/1 rabbit. I like that. It's not like the most efficient thing, but being able to like exile two creatures or an enchantment and a creature, and like who cares about the card draw? Like, yeah, it's good for your opponents, but like typically you're gonna let them draw a card to exile the thing that is about to destroy everyone, or like put the game out of hand. And level 3, return a permanent with mana value 3 regress from your graveyard to the battlefield with an indestructible counter on it. Okay, that's interesting. So pretty limited, has to be mana value 3 or less, but the fact that it can get any permanent and give it indestructible can be really good. Actually don't know how this works with planeswalkers. If you are aware of how that interaction works, please let me know in the comments because I'm curious. Like if your planeswalker with an indestructible counter on it goes to 0 loyalty, I assume it gets sacrificed anyway. I don't know. Let me know if you know. But if you were to bring back something very threatening, like a Phyrexian altar with an indestructible counter on it, that seems pretty good. There are probably some other good things I'm not thinking of, but in general, this seems a little narrow, this card. Like, I'm sure it's going to fit very well in certain decks that are looking to do certain specific things, but this seems like less useful generally than all the other ones. But that being said, still good value. I think even if you just played it for the level 1 and 2 effects, that seems pretty good to me. Like, if you planned on always playing this as I get one rabbit and I get to exile two non-land permanents and its controller their controllers draw a card. That seems good enough to me. So I think this can make the cut. And lastly, Season of Weaving. For 6 mana, you get a sorcery that can draw you 5 cards. Level 1 is draw a card. Level 2 is choose an artifact or creature you control and create a copy of it. Okay, that's pretty good. So you can make 2 copies of something and draw a card for 6 mana. Start to feel like Sublime Epiphany in some ways. A little different than that, but definitely has some similarities. This is a card I always end up cutting, but I'm interested in testing and kind of forcing myself self to play at least a few times because I have yet been able to do that, but I will. I will. Level 3. Return each non-land, non-token permanent to its owner's hand. Okay, so it is like a psych riff. Not really. It hits you too, and it doesn't hit tokens. Interesting. So, you know, given that it doesn't hit tokens, it looks to me like you want to play this in a token deck. Go figure. And blue token decks, I guess there are some. Like there are like Brutaclad would like this, I would think. Adrix and Nev, I think, off the top of my head, those might be two good homes for this card because it turns this level 3 into more of a one-sided board wipe because you're not losing your critical tokens, right? And then obviously if you combine level 3 with level 2, that's nice because you can make a copy of a creature that you then end up keeping. So even if you made a copy of your commander, which is legendary, and then you sacked the original and put it in the command zone, you kept the token, and then you bounce all non-token permanents. So you get to keep your commander in play and no one else does. So that's one way to use this. You could also just draw 5 if you need. You could make 2 copies of things and draw one. You could bounce everything, draw two. Good card, interesting card. Um, yeah, definitely, I think going to be specific to commanders that like these that care about tokens. But I could be wrong. It might be just good enough in any deck that cares about creating token copies of a creature, like you're playing big artifacts or creatures that you might want to copy. Might be good in actually Leonardo da Vinci, for whom I have a commander deck for, because you've already got a bunch of token copies. You could create a token copy of Leonardo and then just kind of bounce everything that wasn't a token. So you keep all your Thopters, you keep your commander. Seems pretty cool. All right, so we're through the seasons. Let's move onward. Skipping these uncommons. Starfall Invocation. Cool art. 5 mana sorcery. Destroy all creatures. If you promised your opponent a gift of of a card, they get to draw a card, then you get to return a creature, only a creature that was destroyed with this to the battlefield under your control. So it's reminds me of something like single combat. And then each player gets to choose a creature on this spell, and it also has this other effect that's interesting. Yeah, this seems good. You get to keep one creature, and everyone else loses everything, but some opponent gets to draw a card. I like this. I could see myself testing this out. If you're playing a deck where your commander is a little bit expensive and you need a board wipe just because like you really just want one board wipe in most decks, but you don't want to lose your commander because it's quite expensive, then I might look into playing this card. All right, Storm Chaser's Talent. 1 blue for a class spell, enchantment. When it enters, you make a blue and red otter with prowess. That's a 1/1. Okay, so 1 mana for a 1/1 prowess token is like a decent baseline. Like it's not unreasonable to pay that. It's almost like a monastery mentor. It doesn't have haste, but like you're obviously getting the flexibility of having these other things. But man, look how expensive those are. So for 4 more mana, getting to level 2 will have cost you 5 in total. 1 for the initial plus 4 for getting it to level 2. But when it gets to level 2, you get to return an instant or sorcery from your graveyard to your hand. That's it. Okay. Level 3 better be pretty good, 'cause I'm not very impressed so far. Level 3, 6 more mana. At this point, you've now paid 11. And whenever you cast an instant or sorcery, you create a blue otter with prowess. That's it? Wow. Is this misprinted? Like, should those 3 and 5 be a 1 and 3 or a 1 and 2? Uh, I don't know about this one. The effects are fine, but way overcosted. I'm not really in love with this card. I wish it cost a little bit less. This seems like it was made 20 years ago when everything cost a lot more and reverse mana cost inflation hadn't happened. Mana cost deflation, if you will. All right. Well, I don't get it. Maybe I'm like underrating how powerful that level 3 is, but like I don't think I'm going to pay 11 mana to just get like a monastery mentor sort of effect. So, why wizards? Why does this cost so much? Okay, well, whatever. Storm Splitter. 4 mana for a 1/4 with haste, otter wizard. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery, create a token that's a copy of Storm Splitter. Exile a token at the beginning of next combat or beginning of next end step. Okay, wow. Okay, so it's a red Scoot Swarm sort of thing, but obviously it's not on landfall, but like it is reminiscent of Scoot Swarm in that like you're gonna double, double, double. It's exponential growth in creature form. Thank God they didn't give this thing prowess. Can you imagine like trying to do the math, figure out like which tokens had which power and toughness? Like, oh my Lord. Um, okay, so how to evaluate this? So the original never leaves. It doesn't get exiled. Obviously, if you just play this out on turn 4 and hope it lives to your turn, that's you're insane. Or your opponents are insane if they let you leave it up because if you get to your turn, I'm sure someone on Reddit has done the math on this already, but like I'll just do it myself quickly. So assuming you like don't buff them. Now, if you have something like shared animosity, like I think if you have a shared animosity out and you land this, like let's let's go to Magical Christmas Land real quick and pretend you have a Ley Line of Anticipation in play because you got lucky and you had it in your opening hand. Whoops. Or you cast it, right? So your spells all have flash. And then you go into, yeah, and then you play Shared Animosity, right? And then right before your turn, let's say you're about to untap and you've got 5 lands in play, and you flash out Storm Splitter right before you untap, and no one has removal. Then you've got a 1/4 with haste. The haste won't matter since you flashed it out, but the point is we want to untap and have all of our mana up. So you play a land, you've got 6 land, and you've got this 1/4 with haste. We can do this analysis with and without Shared Animosity. So let's just do without first. So on your first instant or sorcery, you end up with 2 of these, right? And then, so we played 1 instant or sorcery so far. And then this is 2, 3, 4, 5. So at 5 instants and sorceries, you end up with 32 of these guys. That doesn't seem good enough. So I think in order for this to be good, you need some buff on all your creatures. Either that, or you need something that like hurts people when you have ETBs looking at you, Perforos, as the like the goat, Perforos God of the Forge. This is doubly good because you get 2 damage to each opponent for every copy that enters, but you also get the 3 mana give everything +1/+0, which if you have a lot of these, then obviously that is very impactful. But I, let's imagine you've got shared animosity out, and you get up to, let's say you play only 3 instants or sorceries, which gets you, I think, to 8, right? How do I see the history? Oh, it's here. Yeah, so this is 2, this is 3. So let's say you've got 8 of these guys, and you've got shared animosity. You attack with all 8, then each one gets +7. Is that how this works? For each other. Yeah. So then you're attacking for 64. Still doesn't seem that great. It's obviously good, but like I'm just like this is a lot of work. It's interesting. I think it can be good, but it seems just on very first glance and like this short evaluation that I did, it seems like more of a meme to me. This is no Scoot Swarm. Scoot Swarm's great because like it's inevitability, right? Like you can play it whenever. If they don't remove it, it's just like going to grow and grow and grow. This has to be like a one-time burst. You have to cast all these things in one turn, unless you have a way to end the turn. Like if you're playing Sundial of the Infinite, then like sure, like go ahead and jam this in. Like maybe I put this in my Sealy the Sun's Brilliant stack just for the memes. Again, it would just be for the memes because there honestly are better options, I think. But with Sundial, or if you're playing the old Obeka, which can Sundial, then I could see this working is then it's more like Scoot Swarm. You get to keep all those tokens. What you do, just in case you haven't seen this card or know how it works, is you can't just like attack with the stuff and then end the turn in your second main. You have to, because the reason is what will happen is if you do that, as soon as you end the turn, any things that need to happen at end of turn will still happen then. So instead, what you do is you move to end step, you let all the things go on the stack that need to happen. For example, if you have 4 Storm Splitters in play, 3 of which are copies, and you move to end step, then it triggers and says, okay, you move to end step, create a trigger to exile that token. Then with those on the stack, you activate Sundial of the Infinite, ending the turn, and it wipes any triggers or spells or anything that's on the stack right away. So that could work. If you have ways to buff your creatures, like, Anthem effects, or your commander is an Anthem effect, I could see this being great. Because anything that can give it an additional 1, 2 or more power is going to make it very threatening. But otherwise, I just don't really see him getting there. But this is the card of all the cards I've looked at so far and spoken about, I think this is the one I'm least confident that I'm correct on. But still, at this point, I believe that what I said is true, and I don't think that this is going to be actually really that good. Seems a little, seems like you have to try a little too hard to make it get there. That's not to say it can't get there, but for the amount of work you need to do to make it like so that you win the game from it going off, I feel like there are easier ways to win. Sunspine Links. 4 mana, 5/4 elemental cat. Players cannot gain life. Damage cannot be prevented. When it enters, deals damage equal to each player equal to the number of non-basic lands they control. Woohoo! This one's spicy. Wow. Okay. So immediate comparisons are Price of Progress, which is if you haven't played against this card, you're missing out on an essential commander life experience because like yeah, I mean, it's not as good as Price of Progress in that it's only 1 damage per non-basic, but Price of Progress, first of all, is like nuts. And second of all, this is on a creature that also says players can't gain life and damage can't be prevented. So if they say, well, Teferi's protection still works, unfortunately, because it says your life total can't change, but other protection effects for yourself don't like ones that say like prevent all damage that would be dealt to you. Like, okay, sorry, you can't do that. Um, this seems great in a blink deck. You just play mono. I don't know if there's a mono red blink deck. I don't. That doesn't really make sense. There's only like a couple of ways in red, or rather, not in red, but just like in colorless Conjurer's Closet. Conjurer's Closet. Do I spell that right? Of course, it's the classic. Yeah. So this works. Like, I might put this in my Sahili deck because, I mean, unfortunately, I'm running way too many non-basics, but if I were to rebuild it with just a bunch of basics and like play this as a win con, that seems pretty funny. I don't know. Great option. Definitely a card I'm going to be picking up, adding to my collection. If it's not like super great right now, it will be at some point. Um, Malignus is the only other creature I can think of that is like this. And it can be really strong in decks where you're vulnerable to protection effects that may otherwise just kind of lock you out of the game. So if someone has a glacial chasm, like and they're playing a land stack, like an obnoxious, like hard to interact with land stack, like something like a duck I might play, then this sort of card can just win you the game out of nowhere against them. So that's a good one. Tender Wild God. 2 mana, 2/2, Offspring 2. So 4 mana for 2 of them. Tap to make a mana of any color, or tap to put a +1 counter on this creature. Okay, so it's a mana dork, but you get 2 of them. And they can kind of grow if you don't need to make mana. I like it. I could see this being close to a staple. It's really not good enough as just what it does, but the fact that it's offspring and you can get 2 of them means that I think this is definitely worth it. I think this can just kind of slot into any deck, especially if you care about making tokens. But even without that, just as a 2 mana, 2/2 mana dork that you might just play on turn 2 most of the time, but like occasionally you'll draw it later game, and it kind of just creates 2 medium-sized threats that grow. Nice flexible card. I like it. The infamous Cruel Claw. Baby, look at this guy. like Weasel Zoro, 3 mana, 3/3, legendary creature, Weasel Mercenary. He's got Menace. He says whenever he deals damage to a player, combat damage to a player, exile cards from the top of your library until you hit a non-land. You can cast it by discarding a card rather than playing its mana cost. Cool. This card's great. I mean, I think it just like can go in any deck, but if you're playing a reanimator deck that cares about like getting stuff into your graveyard, casting big spells, like you like I have a Magar of the Magic Strings deck that this like would just so perfectly fit in because it wants to discard big instants and sorceries. It wants to cast spells for free. Um, yeah, I like him. I like him a lot, and it's easy to get through. He's got Menace. It's just a really, really good value card. Like you don't get card advantage because you do have to discard a card, and for that you get to basically cast a non-land card for free. But if you want to be discarding cards anyway, and or if you have like big spells to cast, so like you discard a land or some extraneous thing and you get to cast something huge, this is a cool card. I like it as a commander, like I don't know, maybe it's very much like Magar of the Magic Strings in that regard, except like you can also play big creatures, so it seems really good. And then it's also going to fit very well in just like a lot of random decks, like any reanimator deck or deck that's casting big spells or wants to cast it from exile. Like this might actually make the cut in Prosper, even though Prosper has so many cards at once. Like I have not played Prosper, but this seems like it might be good enough. Thorn Vault Forager, 2 mana, 2/2, another 2 mana Matador. Interesting. Tap for a green, or tap and forage, meaning sack a food or exile 3 from your graveyard to add 2 mana in any combination of colors. Nice. 4 and tap, search for a squirrel, reveal it, put it to your hand, then shuffle. Cool. So just a very strong mana dork in a squirrel deck. Maybe maybe even good enough in any deck. If you either have food to sack or you are filling your graveyard quickly. So if you're playing something like Old Retstein, this could be a really good card because you're just incidentally filling your graveyard anyway. Therefore, it's just like a 2 mana 2/2 that can make two of any color, which seems good. Three Tree City, the infamous land. So as it enters, you choose a creature type, taps for a colorless, or you pay 2 and tap it, choose a color, add that much color equal to the number of creatures you have of that type. So this is like the baby of Gaia's Cradle and in Nykthos. Gaia's Cradle, if you're not familiar, one of the most powerful cards that is not banned in Commander and very expensive. Reserve list card. Taps for a green for each creature you control. This can do that, except it costs 2 mana to activate, and only if all of your creatures are the same type. And then Nykthos is the land that gives you mana equal to your devotion. Again, costing 2 to activate. So this is extremely good. It's going to be better than people think. It's going to fit in more decks than people think. People think like, oh, if you're running a tribal deck, this is like a must include, which is obviously true. But it's also a must include if you have any sort of recurring token maker, even if you're not a tribal deck, if your commander makes 1/1 whatevers, all of a sudden this is huge, right? Uh, this is if you're running any Field of the Dead deck, this goes in there because you might just randomly have four. You need at least four of that creature to net positive, meaning you're making 2 mana because you have to. So let's imagine a scenario where you have 4 land out and one of them is 3 Tree City. If you just tap all four of your land, including this three tree city for colorless, you're making 4 mana, obviously, right? So if you were going to spend the time activating the ability, which cost you two of your other lands, meaning you only have one other, so you've got, let's say you have three plains and three tree city. You use two of your plains to activate the three tree city, and you have to make at least 3 mana off that in order to net neutral, right? Because if you make three, then you still have your one planes you didn't use, and you end up with four total, just as if you were to tap this for colorless. Meaning you need at least four creatures to net positive. So once you have four creatures of the same type, then this makes you 2 mana when you tap it. It nets you 2 mana, right? Because it costs two to activate. So if you can consistently make at least four creatures of the same type, you should have this in your deck. The cost is very low, not price wise, but the opportunity cost of having this in your deck is very low because it can always just tap for colorless. Even if you never get there and you never, someone board wipes every single turn, you just are never able to get extra mana off this, you're still having a land that comes in on tap that makes colorless. So you should err on the side of putting this in more decks and like hoping you get there. Now, if you're never getting there, fine, go ahead and remove it, put it in a deck that where it will fit better. But this seems very good, and I would highly recommend you pick up a copy for your long-term collection. You know I will be. Thundertrap Trainer, 2 mana, 1/2 with Offspring 4. Wow, it's probably pretty good. Let's see what it does. When it enters, look at the top four. You can reveal a non-creature, non-land, put it into your hand. The rest go on the bottom. So it impulses, kind of. And if you pay four extra, you get two of those. Okay, so it's just like a value option. It's not like something that is very efficient, but like if you top deck this late game and just have a ton of mana sitting around, it's a nice option. Nothing really amazing here. I wouldn't play this in a non-blink deck. This doesn't seem good enough, but in a blink deck, seems great because then you can trigger this ETB over and over, and that is really good for only 2 mana on a 1/2 with this offspring effect. Unfortunately, you only get the offspring when you cast it, so if you blink it, you don't get the option to offspring it at that point, but that's okay. Still a good card. All right, we're getting there, almost done. Valley Flame Caller, 3 mana, 3/3 for a lizard warlock. If a lizard, mouse, otter, or raccoon you control would deal damage to a player or permanent, it deals that much +1 instead. Okay, so obviously combos with some of those lizards we went over earlier, and definitely some of the raccoons and otters and mice. You'll know if you want this in your deck. I guess that's really all I have to say about it. It's going to be a great card in the decks that want it. Otherwise, it's just going to be a bulk bin rare. So, pick up a copy and hold on to it for when you need it, but expect not to use it except in very specific decks. Valley Floodcaller, 3 mana, 2/2 Otter Wizard with Flash. Love that Flash. You may cast non-creature spells as though they had Flash. Okay, I like it. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, your birds, frogs, otters, and rats get +1 till end of turn and untap them. All right, Combo City. I'm not going to try to figure out what this combo's with. I'm sure that there are plenty of other people that will do that, but you know, this ignoring the birds, frogs, otters, and rats part, still for a 3/3 for two, sorry, for a 2/2 for three with flash that lets you cast non-creatures as though they had flash. Too bad it's non-creatures. That's sad. I wish it was like anything. But still, you can cast enchantments and sorceries and artifacts. That's can be really good. I think I might end up playing this in random non-bird, frog, otter, and rat jacks, but time will tell. Definitely going to be a combo-rific card, though. There's going to be at least two or three crazy combos with this for sure. Anything that untaps all creatures or even certain types of creatures, be on the lookout. And definitely warning lights should be going off if your opponent plays this card. Be very aware, very wary. Valley Nightcaller, another 1 mana rare. I love this. 1 mana, 1/1 trample, 1/1 trample. Lol. Whenever another frog, rabbit, raccoon, or squirrel you control enters, put a +1 counter on value my color. Okay, so it's just a tribal guy that gets big, kind of like a champion of the parish, champion of the perished, but for whatever you call this group of critters. I guess critter tribal. Valley quest caller. Rabbits, bats, birds, and mice. Scry 1 on ETB and get a buff. Okay, cool. Whatever. Valley rock caller. 2 mana, 1/3 menace. When it attacks, each opponent loses X. You gain X for X the number of squirrels you control. Bats, lizards, and bats. Ooh, gross. Well, this is a scary card in Squirrel and Chatterfang, much like every freaking card in that deck. Oy, I'm gonna die to this at least 50 times. Vren, the Relentless. Legendary creature, Rat Rogue. 4 mana, 3/4 with Ward 2. If a creature an opponent controls would die, exile them instead. Nice effect. Very punishing for a lot of decks. At the beginning of each end step, create a 1/1 rat for each creature your opponent controlled that would exile this turn. Okay, so like any stuff that was exiled for any reason on every end step, you get a 1/1 rat. So looks like a rat tribal sort of card. Don't know if it really makes the cut in any other deck. I think if you want this effect, like this replacement effect, so creatures don't die, you probably run other cards that are more efficient than this. Thinking of stuff like Dothy Voidwalker, even Kalidas, I think is just better than this in a random deck. This one, you get a 2/2 zombie for everyone. So this is very specific. You know, it's either a build around or you put it in a different rat deck. Warren Warleader, 4 mana, 4/4, Rabbit Knight with Offspring 2. When you attack, choose one. Create a 1/1 rabbit that is tapped and attacking, or attacking creatures you control get +1/+1 till end of turn whenever you attack. So if you pay the Offspring and have two of these, you can get both effects, or you can get two of one effect. So you can give your attacking creatures +1/+1. This seems fine. It's pretty good. It's going to be good in like go wide decks. Is it going to be good enough? Possibly. It's definitely going to be good in like the Osier, the white Osier. That is like combo central with this card because if you pay the Offspring, you're going to get not a 1/1 token copy of it, but three 1/1 token copies of it. And then when you attack, you've got three of these. So you could make, uh, you've got three more of these. So four of these total. So you could make 12 1/1 rabbits that are tapped and attacking, or you can make, you can make six that are tapped and attacking and then give all of your attacking creatures +4/+4. Yeah. So anyway, combos with Osier attack aside, this card seems like it only goes in decks that have token doublers. I don't really think it's good enough otherwise, but cool card. It's definitely gonna want to go in decks like that or Mondrak. You know, it's great with like Ocelot Pride and anything that gives you extra tokens because it's got double the effect, like I just mentioned. Whiskervale Forerunner. Can you imagine if you saw one of these mice like in armor? It's just like, look, what is that behind them? It's like wheat or something, right? So these are just like little tiny guys. Like, how is that a 3/4? Like, how is this little mouse a 3/4 gonna trade with this like god? The mysteries of magic. Anyway, 3 mana, 3, 4, 4 mana, 3, 4. When it becomes the target, oh, so it's this Valiant ability that we saw before. When it becomes the target of a spell or ability you control for the first time, look at the top 5. You can reveal a creature mana value 3 or less, put it on the battlefield if it's your turn. Otherwise, if it's not your turn. Why do they have to say that? It's already 4 mana. Now you can't, like, cheat out a blocker. Surprise. Just kidding. You can't. Otherwise, you can put it into your hand. Okay. Like, it's a niche player in a deck that is going to be targeting your own creatures with a lot of stuff. So auras, something like a what does that commander? Feather the Redeemed. But it's only when you target this. And Feather isn't really running random other creatures, so mainly like an aura deck or a deck that is targeting your stuff because you have other sort of valiant cards like this. Seems pretty meh. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 left. So Wick the World. World? If I've ever seen this word. Spiral or move in a twisted and convoluted fashion. Okay, so it kind of means world, I guess. Strange. Wick the world mind. 4 mana, 2 4. When it or another rat you control enters, you make a 1/1 black snail. Is that a new creature type? I'm not sure if I've heard that one before. Otherwise, put a +1 counter on a snail you control. So it's kind of like a mass, except you could keep making tokens if you want. So you either make a 1/1 or you put a 1/1 counter on a snail. And then you could sack a snail to have Wick deal damage equal to sack creature's power to each opponent and then draw a card equal to the power. So kind of reminds me of a Grixis Colors, what is that hamster guy? This thing, Inks and Boo. So, except definitely worse because like Boo is a 4/4 with trample and haste like the same turn. And then like I guess like well, you still have to activate an ability to get that draw. Yeah, I don't know. I guess it's like a commander option. Seems pretty bad, but some people are gonna try it, and I think it. I'm not saying it like can't win, but I don't know. I'm not interested. Wishing Well, 4 mana artifact. First like rare artifact I can recall seeing in the set. There's very little artifact, which is not surprising because there have been so many in other sets, but still a little sad because I love artifacts. Wishing Well, 4 mana artifact. Tap, put a coin counter on it. When you do, you may cast an instant or sorcery with mana equal to the number of coin counters on it without paying its mana cost, and then it gets exiled. Why sorcery speed only? Why you do this to me, wizards? I can't wait until they print a card that lets you cheat these like activated abilities that say sorcery speed only because like even with the Leyline of Anticipation you can't cheat those yet, so they're going to do it one of these days. They're going to say like you can use these things that can only be activated as a sorcery whenever you want, and then all of a sudden people are going to be rushing to find all of these cards like this that can only be used as sorcery and are bad for that reason and find the ones that would be most broken. So major extra credit to you if you want to leave some comments as to which cards you think would be the most broken if they could be activated at instant speed. I'm very curious to know what you might think. In fact, I'll even tell you how to look for it. Just go on Scryfall, do Oracle, and put activate only as a sorcery. And then just look through all these 358 cards and say, okay, which one would be the most broken if it didn't say that? That being said, let's look at this card. Because that's what we're doing, right? Not talking about random other stuff. Put a coin counter on this. So, okay, so you can keep adding coin counters on it. Yeah, so like you don't even have the option not to put the coin counter on it, right? So you always have to tap it, put the coin counter on, and then you may cast an instant sorcery with that mana value. So it's like a Aether Vial, but for flashing back spells from your graveyard. And you, unfortunately, they say equal to, not less than or equal to. So, like, again, why do you have to put so many constraints on this? It seems like it could be a fun card, but like, it's just, I don't know, it's so narrow. You have to cast a one, then a two, then a three, then a four. So it could be good in like decks that have a lot of different mana values. I have an Roar of the Storm deck, and I have a Melek Reforged Researcher, I think is his name deck, that both of which like want to play spells with different mana values. But I don't know. Like, in in any deck, like this is going to be hard to make it work. You're going to have to get a little bit lucky. You're going to find that a lot of times you just don't have that many good targets, or you might need to skip a level. If you have ways to remove counters, that could be good because then you can manipulate based on like what you've got in your graveyard. But this seems a little too narrow to me. I might test it out because I like stuff like this, but it definitely does not seem good enough in general. And for four mana, it's just a little expensive. I mean, you do get something right away. So, like, you definitely want a one drop in your graveyard when you play this because thankfully it doesn't cost any mana to activate. So, you can tap it, put a coin counter on it, cast something. If you have ways to untap it, you can get a little crazy there because then you could cast a one, a two, a three. I don't know. In general, just seems like a lot of work for what you actually get. Egra, Eater of All. Looks pretty badass. It's like a, what's the name of that cougar or mountain lion that was like around our area, LA. It's like killing everything. It's like XP99 or I don't know, had some name like that. Or sacrifice a food. Okay, that's not so easy for most decks to do. 5 mana, 6/6 elemental cat. Other creatures are food artifacts in addition to their other types and have two sac. Okay, so okay, so it is easy for them to get food because everything is food. So it turns every creature into food artifact in addition to their other types. So that's interesting. And then whenever a food goes to the graveyard, Eager gets 2+1 counters. Oh, it doesn't have trample. That's sad. Um, okay, well, this is really interesting. I mean, it has some of the same gross possibilities as like that card we talked about earlier, the giant black moth that makes everything base power 1/1. If you want, you can like kind of wreck everyone's day by playing this as your commander and then just putting a bunch of artifact board wipes in your deck. And that is a thing you could do, and it's gonna be good, and it's definitely not gonna be fun. But there are people that are gonna do that. In fact, if you see this in the command zone across from you, I would expect that to happen and just kind of be very careful overextending or keep, you know, mulligan for a protection spell. I don't love this card. I hope I don't see a lot of it, but it's interesting. All right, last one, Zorline, Cosmos Caller. Another Orzhov card. I like it. 3 mana, 3/3, Flying Vigilance. Love that combo. Shout out again to Mirko. I think like the third or fourth time I've shouted him out in this series. 3 mana, 3/3 Flying Vigilance. When a bat you control attacks, including him, you gain a life. Her, whatever. When Zorline enters or attacks, you can pay white, black, and 2 life. If you do, you get to return a non-land permanent with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield with a finality counter on it. Okay, seems pretty medium. Does some cool stuff. You can play it as a commander. It doesn't look that unique. Finality counters are a little annoying. In general, nothing remarkable for our last card in the review here, but I still like it. All right, well, that wraps it up. I hope you enjoyed this series. This is my first time doing something like this ever, and I know it wasn't super clean or like slick, but that's really not what I'm about. I hope that the things I discussed and the concepts I went over and ideas I may have given you helped you out. And if you have any feedback, either positive or negative, or anything you just want to let me know, please do so. I read all the comments and I try to respond to everything. So really, really appreciate you watching. Please like my videos and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, as I'm trying to build up a following so I can do this more regularly and hopefully someday for a living. But we'll see how it goes. Thank you so much. Have a great day.